Okay, so this is our notes on the executive branch of government, and we've been talking about our system of government and how the Constitution set it up. And let me fix some of this. Okay, so if you remember, we said there's three branches. One is legislative. We've kind of covered that one already, so we'll just call it LEG. And then there's executive, EXE, executive branch. And then the last one we haven't covered yet is judicial. Okay, and these all have very specific functions. The founding fathers of our government, they set it up in a way that each one of these branches has very specific powers, and they counteract each other. So like the legislative branch could never take over and make the rest of the branches do what they wanted to, because they have these things called checks and balances. Like the legislative has the money, but the president has the power to veto a bill. So if the legislative one passes one and the president vetoes it, the law doesn't come into to be a law, and unless they override the veto. Also, the judicial, we're going to talk about them eventually, but they interpret law. So, and they have different courts. The highest one is the Supreme Court, and somebody could challenge a law that maybe most of the legislator and the president, executive branch pass, but then the legislator or judiciary branch could say, no, that doesn't follow the Constitution, and strike it down. Okay, that happens a lot more than you would think. Okay, so today we're talking about this executive branch, and the word executive, chief executive officer, really fits the president well if you know what that is. So the main part of this branch is the president, and president elected every 4 years. We'll talk about that in a minute. And they're really the face of this branch. Okay, now there's other people in it, but the main person we think of when you think of the executive branch is the president. And really their main function is to be a manager. So they manage the government and manage the things that is going on between the legislative, executive, and judicial branch. Kind of keep everybody on the same page, going in their same direction. And really a big job of them, the president, is to foster cooperation. So they're supposed to help each one of these, legislative, executive, and judicial branch, work together. And when that's happening, government's running smoothly. What can happen, though, is if the president isn't fostering cooperation, and it can really make things difficult to function. Because, these can be different parties. We haven't talked about parties, but you can have Democrats, Republicans, and there's some Tea Party and some independents as well. But they don't all agree on most things, and but they come together and they form a law, and the president can then veto and so on. But the job of the president is to get things done and to get people to work together. And also, so this is, he's a manager and a director, and then also he has the power to nominate judges. So anybody that goes to the Supreme Court comes from a nomination for the president, and then the Senate and such will ratify it and vote on it. And also what's really interesting, a lot of people don't realize, is the president can pardon people. So if there's a criminal or somebody's been convicted of an offense, the president could say, I'm going to pardon them from that offense. There was a really famous pardon I always think of is Richard Nixon was a president back in the 70s, and he had some people spy on his rivals during the election, and he got caught doing it, and it's illegal, and he could have went to jail, and he was a president at the time, and in the end he resigned. He was the only president to ever resign, and the vice president took over, and when he did, he gave Nixon a pardon. So Gerald Ford was elected, and when he was elected, he granted a pardon to Nixon. And then nobody could ever charge him with the crimes, and some people argue he never should have done that, but that's for some other day or whatever. But anybody that's been convicted of a crime, the president can pardon. Okay, a lot of times these come in the last days of the president. So on the last week or last month or last couple months, the president will pardon people. Like people will ask for pardons, and maybe he thinks they didn't get a fair trial or something, then he can give them a pardon, and then they don't have to serve the sentence, or they can be let go from wherever they're serving time if they're in prison. Okay, but the president is the main part of this branch. And then also with the president, though, that helps him do all these things is something called the cabinet. And we'll look at them in a minute. But so the cabinet, I'm going to erase this. So the cabinet consists of a lot of people. I'm not going to go over every single one, but Secretary of State is one, Attorney General, Secretary of State. Actually, I did that twice. This should be Defense, so change that. Secretary of Defense. And they all have very specific jobs. They help the president make decisions, so they give him advice, and these are kind of like the president's the CEO, the chief executive officer. Then he has little managers, and they run other departments of the executive branch. So they're managers. So the president is the CEO, chief executive officer, and then he has managers, and these are managers: Secretary of Defense, Attorney General, Secretary of State, and he has many of these, many, okay? And he also has a chief of staff, kind of keeps everything going in the White House. They have ambassadors, the vice president is included in this, and so they all help the president. They help him complete all the functions that need to be done in running the United States government. It's a big job, a lot of different things the president needs to handle each and every day. So he can't do it on his own. He needs help to do that. And he does that through his cabinet. And if we were to look at this link here, let's go back to it. If we went to this link, it kind of gives us a lot of the main ones here. See if we can get it to work. Okay, so here's the cabinet. And we got Vice President, Department of State, Department of Treasury, Department of Defense, Justice, Interior, Agriculture, Commerce, Labor. You can just see all these: Transportation, Energy, Education, Homeland Security. Then you got the White House Chief of Staff, EPA. You can see a lot of people that are in here. Okay, just a lot of people in the cabinet. And then and some people say there's too many. Like, it's good to have some people, but maybe some of these departments we don't even need. And that's something maybe you guys will decide when you get older, and maybe this will change the size of government that we have. Okay, but that's the cabinet. So if we go back to this, and this. Okay, so then also the vice president is in this, but he also has an important job in that he's a president of the Senate, so he kind of leads the Senate. So he's the leader. And a really important job of the vice president is he breaks ties. So if there's a tie, so you have 100 senators, 2 from each state. So if there's a 50-50 vote, the vice president then comes in and breaks the tie by casting a vote. Okay, so that's kind of the cabinet. Let me just erase this. So, and then if you want to be president, these don't apply to being in the cabinet, but if you want to be president, you got to be at least 35 years of age. You have to be a natural born citizen, so you can't be somebody that came over here, acquired citizenship, and then became a citizen. You have to be somebody that was born here. Okay, you have to have lived in the United States for the last 14 years, and then you can run. Okay, and then there's a 2-term limit. There wasn't always a 2-term limit, and really sometimes it's not really, maybe not necessarily even needed. But each term is 4 years, so for 2 terms, if you're elected, and oftentimes they are, it's an 8-year run. So you're in charge of the country for 8 years. And many people argue even maybe that's too long, maybe just 1 term. But, after 8 years, it's often time for a change, So it wasn't until Franklin Roosevelt, he was president during the Great Depression and the Second World War, and he was 3 terms. And after he passed away and was out of office, they passed this amendment and said 2 terms. And some people say even senators should have it, maybe even representatives should have a term limit, so they're not in there so long that, kind of gets the same old thing. And that's probably a good thing. Actually, it's probably true. That's our notes on the legislative branch. Make sure you annotate these. Make sure you show me these when you're done.